Crafty Gemini, and in this video tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make reversible fleece neck warmers, and I'll give you the dimensions so you can make them both for children and adults. Now this project is going to be great for beginners if you've never sewn with any type of stretchy fabrics or bulky fabrics just like fleece. I'll share with you my tips and tricks for the different size needles that you should use, what kind of thread, and what kind of stitch to select on your sewing machine. Now let's go over the supplies you'll need so you can jump right into making your neck warmer. This project doesn't use many supplies at all, so you'll need a working sewing machine with zigzag stitch capability, some polyester thread, then we have 2 strips of fleece fabric here since it is reversible. You can have the fabrics be the same or different. Then you'll need something to measure and cut your fabrics with, and some clips. Now you could use a variety of different fabrics to make one of these neck warmers. I'm going to go with fleece. This is really inexpensive, affordable. It's about 58 inches wide and they come in a variety of colors and prints, and this is really readily available at any of your local fabric or craft stores. Now, before you cut it out to the dimensions that I'll tell you in a minute, let's talk a little bit about orienting the fabric to cut it for this project. So when you buy your fabric, it comes folded in half like this, and on the bottom edge here are the selvages. Okay, now the selvage, from selvage, all this open until the other selvage here, this is called the crosswise grain, and you're going to have the most stretch along that grain. Okay, see how much that stretches? Compare it to this. Not much, but here I get a really good stretch. So what you want to do is orient it so that the length of the dimensions I'm going to give you is going along the stretchiest side. So here's an example of the pieces I've already cut. The length of it needs to be along the stretchiest grain. So make sure that you're orienting your fabric correctly so that the stretch is going long ways on the strip that you need to cut. Now, for the dimensions, I'm going to give you 2 sizes, one for kids and one for adults, but I'm pretty confident that after you make one, you're going to start adjusting it and make it to fit your specific needs. So this is an adult one that I'll be making here, and I've cut this to 8 inches tall by 25 inches in length. You'll need 2 pieces. Now you can choose to make them out of 2 different fabrics since this is going to be reversible, or you can choose to make it out of the same fabrics like I've done here on these. Okay, this is a great project for sports fans, college students and things, because you can find a lot of these licensed print fabrics in the fleece also. So we've cut 2, 25 inches across by 8 inches tall for the adults, and for the kids I would say it's probably good up to about 10 or 11 years old. I cut those at 7 inches by 22. So for you to see the difference in them, this is a child's one and this is an adult one. Okay, now you can adjust them if you like it to fit higher up, or you want to lift it up so that it covers your nose and your mouth on a really cold day. Then feel free to add a couple more inches to the height of it. Totally adjustable, and you can make them suit your needs. Now once you have your 2 pieces of fleece cut, making sure that the stretchiest grain line is going this way. You see how that is? Because this, remember, it's going to be sewn up and it needs to go over your head. You don't want all your stitches to pop. You want the fabric to stretch over. We're going to place one on top of the other with pretty sides touching. And if you don't know how to find the pretty side, maybe on a solid piece of fleece like this, all you got to do is pull it along the grain line. And you see how it rolls? It's going to roll to the wrong side. So that's on this green one. So I know this is the pretty side since it rolled to the wrong side. And the same thing with this one. It's going to roll back towards the wrong side. So another quick tip there. Place these pretty sides touching, place some clips all the way around, and we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're just going to stitch along the 2 long edges, leaving these 2 short sides open. Now I'm at my sewing machine, and I'm on my computerized machine now because this one has a zigzag stitch capability. If you have a stitch that you can look up in the user manual, if it's a lightning stitch, sometimes called a stretch stitch, you're looking for a kind of slanted zigzag. If your machine has zigzag capability, then you can also create your own by adjusting the width and the length. So I'll tell you that mine is set to about a 1.5 stitch width, which is the zig and the zag this way, how wide it's going side to side, and then a 3.0 length, which is 3 millimeters in length as it goes forward this way, okay, the spacing. So adjust your zigzag to that. You really don't want to have a really wide and open zigzag because you'll see the stitches in the seams. You want something a little narrower. Because it's going to be stretching over people's heads, especially for kids, I don't want any stitches popping and them having holes in their neck warmer. So I prefer to use a narrow zigzag stitch, which allows the fabric to stretch without the stitches popping. Now I'm still using just the regular presser foot on my machine, and I have an 80-12 universal needle here, which I find works fine for just 2 layers of the fleece. If your machine is not going over it, switch to a 90-14 needle. And then the key here is to use a polyester thread, which is what I always prefer whenever I'm sewing with fabrics that stretch. Any type of knits, I always put in a polyester thread in my machine, and that's what I find works best for me. Now we're gonna be using about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm using black thread here because I want you to see the stitch that I'm gonna be using. Obviously you would use a thread that matches better with your fabric. Now we're just gonna stitch along the long sides. And here's just a little close-up of the zigzag stitch so you can see what I mean by a narrow zigzag. It still allows the fabric to stretch a lot, really, and there's no stitches that are popping yet. If you had a straight stitch, all to contain these 2 layers of fabric together, and you pulled on it like this, the stitches would pop. All right, now here's a quick little sample that I made. Same 2 fabrics. You can see I cut them along the stretchiest side. I sewed them together with a straight stitch, and now watch what happens when I pull. See how all those stitches popped? That's what happens when you sew stretchy fabrics with a straight stitch. So again, that's why I mentioned I like to use a narrow zigzag, because I can still stretch the fabric without pop stitches. Now once you've sewn up both long sides, reach inside, flip the whole thing right side out. And then you're going to fold this raw edge to meet the other. So you kind of have to roll this up almost like stockings or a sock. So just roll it up about halfway. I put my hand in here, and then I bring this guy to match it. So I see the center seam here, I bring the other one to match it, and then I see that my fabrics are now one short end and the other short end are pretty sides touching, and that's what you want. So line up this seam here. I'll typically open the seam allowance so that there's less bulk and place a clip right there. And then work your way around to the other seam and match those ends there as well. Now we're going to sew around this as a circle, right, as an opening, but you want to leave an opening somewhere because you'll have to flip the whole thing right side out. So I think I'm going to do it on this side, and I like to leave an opening somewhere where it's just even fabric, not somewhere where there's a bunch of bulk like the seams. So I'll start a little ways over here and work my way around, and then I'll stop. And for this project, because the fleece condenses so good, you don't need to leave a massive hole. Just leave about 2 inches. That way you have a smaller opening to close once you're done with this sewing part. And I sew from the inside, so I just roll it forward as I feed it through the machine. Match my seams. And once you have your opening, you'll reach in through that little opening and flip the whole thing right side out. All right. Now I've used black thread, but you can see that when you pull on this, it already starts to close it up. So this is the small opening that we need to shut. Ideally, you'd use a thread that matches the fabrics that you're working with so that then you can go back and stitch it up. And I prefer to do this part by hand, so I'll show you how to do that. But if you're really in a rush, you could also just stitch it shut on the machine if you use the thread that was going to blend in, okay? For hand sewing the opening shut, I just have a regular hand sewing needle, and I cut about 18 inches or so of a thread that blends in. Then we're going to tie a knot on the end. So all I do is I take the long end that's loose. I've just threaded it through so that there's a short one and then a longer one, okay? And they're both not knotted yet. I put the needle where the needle eye is on my right hand, and I take the long end and I place it right where the needle eye is, and then with this hand I pinch them both. Now the rest of this I wrap around 3 times around the needle shaft. So hold it there together, and then 1, 2, 3. And then all those little twists that I just did are underneath my fingernail here. So I pinch it really tight, and slide and pull the thread, slide, slide, slide. And I've made a little teensy knot right on the end. Let me cut away a little bit of this tail, but there's my knot. So now we're ready to start sewing. So then we come in here, let's find our opening. I think it's on the blue fabric, yep. And I go inside first so that I hide the knot away. Then I just come up on one side. And so you're going to basically take a bite from this seam allowance, a bite from this seam allowance, and pull the needle so that it's a ladder stitch and it's cinching together this. Instead of you seeing the stitches sitting on top of the fabric, they're going to be caught inside the seam allowance. As you pull, it cinches the two pieces of fabric together. So let's go again. And the seam allowance, I mean in that bit of fabric that's gotten folded under. So don't pick up stitches on top of the fabric there. Try to grab fabric from the inside where you're not going to see it. So a little pinch there, a little pinch here, and then I pull together. And it's getting caught on my pins here. Let me move this pin cushion. And you can see how that right there has already been closed up. So again, a little from here, a little from here. And these hand stitches are super forgiving on fleece because the fabric is so bulky. So if you've never done any hand stitching before, don't let that keep you away from trying this project. It's really simple. All right, looks good. It's funny because you can see more of the black stitches than you see of this gray thread. So gray is a great color to use for a variety of different fabrics and prints because it blends in nicely. So if you don't have a thread for your machine or for the hand stitching part that matches your fabric, go with a neutral like a cream or even a gray. So once you get to the end and I make sure there's no opening left, I just go in somewhere there in the seam allowance and I pull through, leaving this last loop. Do you see this loop without pulling it all the way through? And then I just put the needle through it once and through it twice. And when I pull, it's twisting, twisting, twisting. And you see how it's twisted and it's taking it with it? That's going to make a little knot right there. And then I just put it in somewhere inside like the first layer of fabric. So just in the blue so that it's not coming out here in the green. Pull completely to hide basically from where the knot is somewhere here to where I'm about to cut. Leaves me a little thread tail there as a little bit of insurance so that you don't cut your thread right where the knot top is, okay? And there it is. And now that your project is complete, you may be tempted to take an iron to it so that you can kind of press it a little bit flatter. But remember, this kind of fleece, at least the kind that I'm using, is 100% polyester. So you definitely do not want to hit a hot iron on any type of synthetic textile. Otherwise, you can either scorch it or melt it. So for me, I like the way that this drapes. I like that when you use two different fabrics, you get a peek of the second fabric creeping out. You can even fold this down a little bit as you're wearing it to show both fabrics. And there you have it, our reversible fleece neck warmer is complete. I hope you enjoyed this quickie video tutorial. Definitely give this project a try, especially if you've never worked with fleece before. Use my tips and tricks and I bet you'll be cranking a ton of these out. Make them for anybody of all ages, and remember, feel free to change up the dimensions to make it taller so you can fold it in half and have 4 layers instead of just the 2, depending on your climate and your style or your taste. You can totally make this your own. Now, if you enjoyed this video tutorial, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. This video was day 8 of my 12 days of last minute DIY gifts, and that means I'll be back tomorrow with another free video tutorial. Thanks again for watching, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next video.